And really, you only got to get this right, because afterwards that lime is highly immobile in the soil. So a little bit of lime sprinkled around the root zone is probably only going to affect the pH in the top 1 to 2 inches of the soil. So you want to do this right the first time. You want to incorporate that lime as deeply as possible prior to planting. With your fruit plants, you're going to see a term called chill hours. This is important to understand. In that, chill hours is basically the dormancy period, the resting period of that plant. And we have all different requirements for our different plants and also our different varieties within those plants. Apples can range from little to no chill hours down at 300 all the way up to 1200 chill hours. Peaches the same way. So if you have a low chill hour plant, essentially what's going to happen in our climate is some years you may have that 300 hours of dormancy, which is temperatures below 45 degrees and above 32 degrees. You may accumulate enough chill hours in, by the first of the year. So essentially it was cold enough in December. That plant has rested to its, genetic programming. And then it starts accumulating heat units. So if it, say, warms up for 2 weeks in January, it's going to start thinking spring is already here. It's going to start swelling buds. And inevitably, we are going to have another cold snap, and that plant is going to then be susceptible. So a lot of times people get misunderstood with, is it cold hardy? That USDA cold hardiness zone, zone 7. That only works for a dormant plant. If it is already blooming, if it is already pushing out growth, the cold hardiness zone 7 doesn't matter as much anymore because, again, it's already growing. It's going to be susceptible to being frosted back, tissue as a result. So make sure you know roundabout what your area gets and you match a variety with what you can expect to receive in the Clayton County area. And I did a little research today. Jonesboro has a GeorgiaWeather.net weather station. And it took me like 4 years worth of data. And it looked like 1 year was as low as 570 chill hours. The high end was about 800 chill hours. So you want to find about a medium chill hour requirement type plant. You don't want one that, say, needs 1200 chill hours because you may not reliably get quite 1200 chill hours most years. And I've got a picture here of what happens. So that's kind of how it works. Your winter chill hours are satisfied. Say you've got 800 chill hours for your year. It's the 1st of March. That plant is going to start waking up. It's going to start coming out of dormancy. It's going to accumulate those heat units, and then it's going to bloom. And we want it to be springtime when that bloom happens and not another frost or mid-February. In the rare case that you get a variety that is high of a chill, and it varies on this from the Fort Valley area every now and then, it wasn't a cold enough winter and their peaches may not set a full. So this is what's going to happen if you have a high chill variety and you're in a medium to low chill area, is all the buds just kind of don't really come out. They just look like a plucked chicken, and you get poor fruit set. Even some of your leaf buds don't even come out of dormancy. So again, you don't want to be on the high end, and you don't want to be on the low end. You want to be right about average for your area with your varieties. Try to avoid frost pockets. So, cold air is heavier. It's going to settle down into low-lying areas. This is more of an issue with, like our vineyards and stuff like that. But, and most of us with the home, we don't really have a choice. We have the open area that doesn't have shade. So that's where we plant. So this is more of an agricultural vineyard orchard layout type of scenario. But know that if you do have a low spot near say, a pond or near a stream, that can be kind of a cold air sink where if you are planting plants like plums, what else would be peaches, stuff that blooms really early in the year, those areas closest to the low-lying areas or the water source can be kind of a cold air sink. Talked on this already, so please, please, please soil test before you plant these plants. Story here is my first year on the job, these folks called and said, we ordered about 25 trees through the mail, and what do we do when we can't dig down beyond 2 feet before we hit a shale layer? And I said, well, can you plant somewhere else? And they said, no, this is the only spot that doesn't have, we've got 9 acres, but this is the only spot that's not covered in woods. I said, well, that's probably the reason why there's no trees there. But done a soil test to the proper depth of, 6 to 8 inches, they would have known before they even ordered the trees that they couldn't dig down beyond 2 inches without hitting the shale layer. So please do some soil samples and avoid some of those problems and surprises that can come back later on to haunt you. So my approach, I like always talking on kind of what I do here. I'm not saying I do everything by the textbook or anything like that. It's very much just a hands-on type learning activity for me. But sort of like I said, I needed a landscape. That's the aerial view of our place from 2015. There wasn't a lot going on. I inherited a lot of old unmanaged apple trees, a couple pears, and some old muscadine trellises that had privet and everything else underneath the wires, so they were kind of a lost cause. But I needed a landscape. I'm a gardener, I'm a county extension agent. I couldn't in my right mind accept the situation that I had, which was some pretty bad grass and a whole lot of weeds. So needed plants, and to me, a landscape is more fun when you can walk around and pull something off and eat it. So, but also know that landscapes are not static. So if you start putting in some bigger type trees, which I have, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but this bed that went in, I think back end of 2017, put in this kind of big continuous bed here. In the corners on both driveways are seedling pecans. So probably in another 20 years, this might now be a shaded type garden situation where now it's full sun. There's a fig in front of that pecan closer to the road. There's also a big fig down here. This bed along here is stone fruits. I've got some Asian persimmons along the way. There's blueberries up here, pear yard, where I had 4 overgrown full-size apples. This is standard size apples. So these things were, probably 25 to 30 feet tall. Finally gave up on them after about 3 years of trying to prune them and bring them back into shape. And so I put in a semi-dwarf apple orchard right here. So that's kind of the roundabout changes. This is a run of blueberries and raspberries over here, and some muscadines, some more black, and there's a few things that are different on this. So a lot of grass, if you like to mow. I still got a lot of room to mow grass and to play around. So I think the key is just planting with a plan, having a plan, but also thinking about diversity. We are really lucky in Georgia in that we have a long growing season. And if you plant enough different things, you can be eating fruit really as early as April, all the way in November off of these plants. So, and that bullet there, soil is your most important asset, the thing to get right from the get-go. I spend a lot of time composting. Almost all of my soil, which is pretty heavy clay, gets a good amount of compost, soil conditioner added to improve drainage, get better rooting. And are there things that you can do either through pruning, through better rootstock, through infrastructure that can make this more manageable for you. One thing that kept kind of coming back to me was these big apple trees that I inherited. These were, again, standard size trees. They were way too big, you know, and I'm up trying to prune them with a cordless reciprocating saw, 15 feet off the ground, you know, my arms and legs wrapped around a branch with the saw above my head. And I thought, this is just silly. This is not safe. I can't afford to break my leg falling out of this thing or eat something even worse. So, you know, think about things, how vigorous, how big is this plant going to be in 5, 10, 20 years, and know what, you know, I knew my ability and my time was also going to be kind of an inverse kind of correlation to what I was going to be able to devote to these plants. I've got 2, soon to be 3 young kids. I know in another 5 years, I'm going to have even less time to manage these plants out in the garden. So I'm trying to think of ways that can make it hopefully easier and not just more work on me as the plants get bigger. So this is my score sheet. Brandon was asking about some of the plants I've got. I sort of talked about them there a little bit, but I think, and this may be pretty accurate, but I think I'm up to 56 apple trees now. And once you learn to graft, you can have even less trees and more varieties. You know, you can put different varieties grafted into the top of these trees. So a lot of fun you can have, a lot of different horticultural techniques you can play with as you get more into fruit gardening. And another picture here of kind of how nice fruits in the landscape can look. You can see the Google Street view of the house before we moved in. Not a lot there, right? Other than that row of big apple trees, the pampas grass on the corner of the driveway. That was the first spring after I did that big bed install. So in this bed, you know, it's not just fruits. I think that's the important thing too, is, you know, kind of mixed plantings with fruits and ornamentals and, you know, plants for your pollinators and things. You know, you've got a fig down here at the bottom, a row of stone fruits. I think I've got room for 6. I initially did pomegranates mixed in here. And I'm just down to just 1 pomegranate. I've had a hard time kind of getting them off the ground with some winter killing frosts and things like that. So I've replaced Persimmons and they're doing quite well. But that's the view of that same driveway back in the spring. So, I mean, I kind of take pride in that street, and they slow down in front of my house, you know, stuff's in bloom, but I enjoy walking the yard and picking some figs, reaching down to get my hands and knees and picking some strawberries, because there are strawberries interplanted under planted under the stone fruits and things like that. So these plants can work in a very attractive landscape. And I sort of talked about infrastructure. If you're going to grow any of the vines, you're going to need infrastructure. But here is a trellis for apples. So you can kind of see those angled shoots. There is about a 100-foot run. It's actually 95 feet. Those are 9-foot trellis posts, 5 wires. And it's kind of a French method of growing apples. Of course, this only works because I'm using dwarfing rootstock. And they're planted on angles to kind of take out some of that upright vigor. So that plant kind of thinks it's a branch. And eventually, this is just year 1 right here. I'm hoping if this works, I will have, you know, just that 30-degree angled trunk / branch. And hopefully it should be just nothing but fruits all the way down that main branch. And then I'll keep it pruned back to just that branch or cordon, as it's called. So, but you can do this. I mean, you can do espalier with, gosh, figs, pomegranates. You can do bonsai with pomegranates. So have some fun, some ways to kind of make things a little more manageable. The idea here is, you know, again, I'm dealing with apples on a 2-dimensional plane instead of a 3D irregular tree canopy. That's obviously going to be harder to put out any kind of spray. So it's very quick, very easy for me to just walk up this line and spray my trees for fungal diseases and insects. Again, they can look really, really nice. So this is a grapevine. This used to be the only way grapes were grown in the old country and even California, which is just, it's called a head training of grapes. Of course, now they're on wires and trellises and things like that. But I think that the head trained grapes look kind of cool by themselves. So, and then I talked on espalier. That's going to work probably best. I mean, the species that do best with that are going to be your spur forming fruit trees like apples. But again, it can be done with figs. I've seen figs with trained and they look quite nice. So this is a little map or a kind of graph grid that I put together. So if you do enough fruit gardening and get diverse in your plantings, really you can walk the yard. This starts in May, but I mean, we were eating strawberries in April this year, all the way into November. If you have some later varieties of even persimmons, your apples and your pears, I mean, you can still be eating those fresh long and into the wintertime because they're going to store pretty well. So again, just get out there and start growing. Start having some fun. And I think why I like fruit growing, it's really the reason why I'm an ag agent now. I'm a gardener, because growing up, my grandfather had fruit plants in his landscape. And as a kid, you know, it was awesome for me to go to his house and be able to climb trees and eat fruit at the same time. So I think it's a great way to get children involved with gardening, with appreciating fresh fruit, vegetables and things like that. So me and my crew, we have a good time. All right. Randy, do you want to take some questions before we start on the individual plants, or you want me to just go through and then we'll finish with Q&A?
We can just wait till the end, but there's some questions in the chat, but you know, we can just wait till the end and we'll knock them out.
Okay, okay. All right, so figs, like I said, man, figs, if you're new to gardening, even if you're not new to gardening, you've got to have some figs. One is you can't find figs at the grocery store of any sort of quality, so you have to grow them yourself. And man, there is not another fruit plant that is as easy to grow as a fig. These are some of our Celestes from a couple years ago. Very, very nice fig, very nice fig. So the varieties that are going to do best for you, really from say making up, you're going to want more of the frost hardy type plants. Celeste, brown turkey, hardy Chicago, LSU purple. And I think most of these are going to be hardy down to like 15, 20 degrees. But you know, again, that USDA hardiness zone map, that's only like the most extreme temperature that you'll have in that area. That doesn't mean that every year you'll get that most extreme. I mean, I think even in Canton, we've only been zone 8 for the last few years. I've got lemongrass that hasn't been killed back for 3 winters now. So you can probably keep one alive that's not quite cold hardy to our area, but just know that it is susceptible or more susceptible to being frosted back to the ground. They grow really, really quick. I'll show you some pictures on how I keep mine pruned. And biggest challenge with a lot of gardeners is again, that growth rate is eventually they just get too big to really harvest from. So they're fruiting on current season's growth for the most part. Some, I think brown turkey will have 2 crops, meaning that it may set some fruits early in the summer off of last year's growth, but then the second crop will come end of August, September. Celeste is more of a single crop at the end of the season, like right now. About the only pest is ambrosia beetles. And you see this picture here, that's the trunk of a fig bush. And you know you've got ambrosia beetles if you see these things sticking out that look like toothpicks. Clear evidence you've got. The only treat that is to cut the portions of the plant out that are affected, destroy them, burn them, throw them in the trash, get them away. But the plant will regrow. It's still got a live root system, and you'll get more suckers. So they are self-fertile. That's another nice thing. I didn't talk on that too much earlier, but a lot of our fruit plants require that cross-pollination. If you're limited on space and you just have room for one fig, that's perfectly fine. You only need one. So, and they're pretty adaptable to soil conditions, you know, heavy clays, lower pH, you know, down to 5.5 as it gets. About the only problem I see is sometimes people will fertilize them too much. And if you do fertilize them too much, sometimes they can be just rocking and rolling a little bit too much. That growth is a little too supple. It doesn't harden off going into wintertime. And then the plants can be more susceptible to that winter kill or that frost damage. So once those plants are 4 or 5 years old, I'd say you probably get by without even fertilizing at all. Another reason why I love them is they are one of the easiest plants to propagate yourself. So these are a variety of fig I got from a retired nurseryman up in Ball Ground. He's 95 now, and this is a variety, I don't know the name, he just says it's a white fig. So I took some cuttings from his bush and got them rooted here in my basement with just, you know, a Rubbermaid container, some kind of moist potting soil. And you can see just 2 months later, man, I've got shoot growth, I've got full leaves, and those things, had I planted them, probably might have even carried fruit this year. So one of just the easiest plants to have and a great plant to share with friends and family. So this is one of my bushes here. This is a Celeste. And you can see at year 2, that thing was already up pretty much eye level on me. And so now how I manage this bush, for one, you can see, so this mulch ring around here, I think I started with 3 of the 8-foot sections of metal edging that you can buy at the hardware store. By year 3, I had to double that. So I think I'm up to like 42 feet around that thing. And I'm still getting whipped with branches when I go by on the mower now. So they grow incredibly quickly. But again, the goal for me is fruit. I don't want a tree. I don't even want too high of a bush. So I try to prune that thing right about chest level. I try to keep everything below eye level because my bush now is already 10 feet, if not higher, with some of those shoots in the middle. So annual pruning as late in the year as possible in terms of dormant season. So 1st of March, even if you already have green buds swelling, you can still prune because pruning is always going to invigorate growth. So we never want to prune a fruit plant or really almost any type of plant in the fall or even in the dead of winter because if it is going to start to get warm, we don't want that plant coming out of dormancy a little too early because that pruning initiates or invigorates growth. So, and you'll notice this picture here, the leaves on the ground. So I try to do this number out the leaves, kind of like you remove the leaves as you go up. I try to kind of do that so I could actually see the fruits a little bit better and make sure I wasn't reaching for a fruit that had a wasp on the back end. But if your plant starts to get as bushy and dense as this one's now getting, it's going to be, you know, completely shaded, not going to be ripening fruit. In the middle of that plant, even on some of the outward type branches, you know, these are big, huge leaves and just not going to get sun in the center of that plant. So yeah, I try to remove some leaves just to open it up a little bit and to keep an eye on those wasps that will invariably be in there. The Asian persimmons, I'm assuming that's kind of what you're selling with your plant sale. There are the native persimmons. Most folks around here that I find have an aversion to persimmons, and it's almost always because they grew up or as a kid or at some point in their life, they ate a native persimmon, that was not quite ripe. So the native persimmons are astringent, and if they are not fully ripe, like squishy on the ground, they will have that astringency that just kind of makes you pucker up. So there are non-astringent Asian varieties, and they are a wonderful fruit. They are absolutely terrific. So these are some fuyu that were brought to me by a colleague in my county building. Really, really nice, quite easy to grow when they set fruit. They're not always reliable croppers year in and year out, but for as pretty of a plant as they are and for as easy as they are overall, I think they're still worth putting in. They do have a nice fall color most years. We have a pretty good circular on growing these, so circular 784. And I think I've got some pictures here of the trees. So this is Mr. Majid. He's a guy that worked in our county environmental health department. He's got like 5 trees, I think. Oh, I've got, here you go, 3 trees, 5 years old. That year, 2016, man, this guy just had tons of fruit off of these relatively young trees, beautiful fruits. Those were the ones here on my desk. And the nice thing about these is you don't have to wait for them to get soft. They are non-astringent. So as long as they're fully ripened and colored up like that, you can crunch them just like an apple. Absolutely wonderful taste. And it's hard to describe if you've never had one. To me, it's just sort of tastes like fall, you know, that pumpkin spice type flavor. To me, they're wonderful in that they're so unique. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with the astringent types. As long as they are ripe, and you notice Graham here, we put in, so on that driveway planting, we put in 3 fuyu. These trees were supposed to be like Mr. Majid's here. When they finally fruited 2 years later, they are obviously quite different. You can see they're kind of acorn shaped. They're a lot bigger. The first year I got one that ripened, and I was all excited because it was orange, and I sliced into that, took a big bite, and you know, it was that nasty astringency. So they must have been mislabeled at the nursery or something. So we knew that last year when we got all these fruits, because the one tree gave us about 15 fruits of that size, and I knew that they just had to ripen, and they took a while to ripen. We picked those in November, and I think they sat on the windowsill for about 2 weeks before they finally started getting soft enough to eat. But boy, once they did, I mean, it was just really, really nice taste, almost like a mix of a mango and a papaya. So, you know, most of our North American fruits that we were used to growing and used to eating, they're not going to taste anything like this. They really kind of almost have a tropical taste. Pomegranates, I've given them a try a few times. I think they have a good spot in the landscape in that they are easy to grow. They kind of grow almost like a crepe myrtle. They have a really pretty bloom. You can see that's a picture of a pomegranate bloom in my yard from this spring. So they are very, very nice. I wish I could say I've gotten a lot of fruit on them, but I haven't yet. The challenge I've had is probably a number of different things. One, we talked about those chill hours. So these pomegranates are cold hardy to our zone 7, some even up to zone 6. They have a low chill hour requirement, so they tend to want to start growing earlier than most of the other plants. And then you're going to get some cold weather, and then these things die back to the ground. So they've always recovered and grown right back, but when you lose that growth, you don't get fruit and flowers that year. So that's why with that front bed along the road there, I've kind of slowly transitioned most of them out into the persimmons. I do have one left, and I actually have some fruits on it this year finally because it didn't die back to the ground. So, but I know these things work. I see old yard bushes of them, you know, plants in older folks' yards that have been there for generations, 20, 30 years. So I know they can do well. I think it's just getting them past those first couple winters when they're in the ground. So One of the things with our clay soils is you may not get that brighter red color in the clay soils. And you can get some later in the season type fungal diseases. So they're worth putting in. If I was limited on space, I would probably put something else in. So where I have plenty of space, you know, I've saved this one bush. So I'm going to give it a few more years and see how it goes. But I think that's all part of it. And I think, you know, that's what I would, you know, encourage all of you to go home from this. If you take one thing, is to just know that, you know, this is all a learning experience. And I think you're going to learn some of what is going to do best at your place. And hopefully you get some fruit, and some of what you like in a fruit, because not all of us like a persimmon or even a fig. There's some crazy people out there that don't like figs. So you're going to find kind of your niche in the fruit gardening world, and you're going to just kind of do whatever you and your site can do the best with. So, but again, full sun on these. This was a plant that was at the Good Samaritan farm. We put these in, and they fruited and flowered and then fruited that very first year off the pot. So I think I picked them a little early. If you think about when pomegranates are in our supermarkets, it's usually like late summer, if not fall, right before Thanksgiving. And I walked by this plant for, gosh, all summer long, you know, because that, like with most things, they say, well, don't let them fruit, don't let them carry fruit the first year at least, if not first 2 years. So we had a good bloom on all 6 of these bushes, and I left one fruit because I just wanted to see. And I walked by this plant every day for, you know, months and months, and I thought, well, maybe now's the time. And I think I finally picked it in like September, and you can see it wasn't quite ready yet, but it was still pretty good. All right. That down version of fruit. Is anyone still there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought I was just alone in my basement still. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but we got a bunch of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Start
All
with.
right. Let me figure out where that is. I'm on my little laptop screen here, so this isn't...
You want me to just call them out to you?
Sure.
All right. So first question is, does a pomegranate grown from a seed need to be grafted in order to fruit?
I wouldn't think so. So pomegranates, for one, if you want to get more pomegranates, they are very easy, just like, so that would be the way I would try to grow more pomegranate bushes is, you know, either those hardwood dormant cuttings taken in late February and rooted, or even the softwood cuttings, so that early spring growth that starts coming out. But most of our pomegranates are self-fertile. So a seed planted from a self-fertile variety should be almost completely or quite reliably close to the parent fruit that it came out of. So it wouldn't have to be grafted.
All right. Next question is from David.
And I guess the nuance in that question is that no fruits have to be grafted to fruit. You can plant an apple seed, it's going to carry a fruit. It's just not going to be a Granny Smith fruit if it came out of a Granny Smith. So you can still get fruit, and who knows, you may have a completely new variety.
All right. Next question is, does the pollination requirement of figs make it impossible to grow figs in a hydroponics room? If not, how do you pollinate them?
So the figs that we grow only have female flowers, and they do not require the pollinator like the California figs or some of the European type figs that have the open hole and are pollinated by a small wasp. The figs that we would grow here don't require that pollination. So I guess in theory, you could grow them in a greenhouse, in a grow house, as long as you had enough light or something like that.
All right, and someone, I guess they want to plant a fruit tree in a pot for about a year. So they're asking about how big should that pot or that container be for the fruit tree?
I mean, as big as you can comfortably then move that pot around. So, you know, the bigger, the better. But our secretary bought a fig bush at our spring sale, and she kept it in a big pot all growing season, and it's done rather well. I think the only thing you need to keep in mind with anything in a pot is it's just going to require more watering and things like that.
All right, is mulching around the tree important, and how thick should you apply it?
Absolutely important. One of the biggest challenges or growth inhibitors of really anything, but especially fruits, is that competition with grass. So if we can eliminate that competition with grass, preferably with mulch and not just bare ground, but with mulch, you know, you're going to slowly improve your soil structure and improve your soil biology, and, you know, keep soil temperatures more regular in the cold and in the summer, and, you know, moisture retention, everything. So 4 to 6 inches of mulch around your trees, your bushes is most ideal. With mulch, you know, I like a good kind of just arborist off the back of the truck type wood chip mulch. Pine straw works, although I don't like it as much. I don't think it does quite as good a job as holding water. One thing you have to be cautious of is with your wood chip mulch is if it's kind of the manufactured mulch and it's too fine. In some cases, that material can kind of bind together. You know, those fungal bodies will start working. The mycelia will connect all those particles. If the particles are too fine, they can kind of bind and almost create almost like an impenetrable barrier below, which is great for weed control. It's absolutely great for weed control, but you want water and everything else to be able to go through there too. And I've had some really fine mulch around my blueberries, and the water will just bead right off. So you want a loose, chunky, kind of irregular shaped mulch up to maybe 6 inches away from the trunk. You don't want it right up against the trunk.
All right, and Harrison said he has a peach tree. I guess it's 5 years old, and he only got 5 peaches last year. How can he increase fruit production?
Well, one, I'd want to know if a soil test was done, if the pH is right. Peaches get a lot of disease with brown rot. They're going to get cuculio. So I guess, did we only get 5 peaches, period? Or did we get 5 peaches and a whole bunch of other rotten, bug-filled peaches? Because if it was only just 5 fruits, period, on the whole entire plant, then maybe you have a variety that, you know, the chill hours aren't kind of suited for your area. Or maybe you got a late frost that knocked back a lot of the blooms. But by and large, a lot of the folks that have peach trees around here, they did okay. But really, if you want to grow a peach and actually get good edible peaches, you probably need to commit to this program. You know, probably at least 1 dormancy spray, you know, maybe a bloom spray for brown rot. That's when brown rot starts, is at bloom. So a fungicide at bloom, and hopefully a few cover sprays of an insecticide and fungicide post bloom, because, you know, we're the peach state for some reason, but peaches are not easy to grow here.
Yeah. All right, and 3 fig questions. So one person has a problem with their figs not ripening. Someone wants to know how to get a better harvest of figs. And then someone planted 2 fig trees a few feet apart, and they're wondering, should they just cut one down now or just keep pruning them every year to keep them from, growing into each other.
Okay. So the figs not ripening, that's a good question. And that's actually one that I'm noticing on mine this year. We had a really different spring. I'm wondering if that kind of cooler spring, at least up here, we had a near frost that first weekend in May. So I'm wondering if that cooler weather kind of slowed things down just a little bit. But also if you did fertilize, that plant could still be just pushing out too much vegetative growth. So not really a great answer on why they're not ripening. I think it could be a couple of different things. It's something that, I've noticed. I've talked to a couple of gardener friends that have figs. Their figs seem to be kind of the same way, just not really ripening when in years past the same bush has provided just quarts and quarts of fruits from August all the way into September. So I don't know exactly. I think it could be a mixture, but if fertilizer was used, I think that could have been pushing them a little bit too much vegetatively, and that can slow down the ripening too. And then the other question was 2 figs too close together. If you have room, I would try to dig one of them up and put it somewhere else if you can, if you have room, because really, let me see if I keep my internet signal. My bush here is just right outside the door here. So you can see how wide this thing is. It's probably at least, 15 feet wide. There's that fig bush. So 10-foot centers, it's going to start shading another one out if it's within 10 feet. So I would try to give them something more like 15 feet to 20 feet if you can. Were you guys able to see that?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the last fig question, this will probably be like, the peach question you answered. They want to get a better harvest of figs because, well, it sounds like they might have a bird or a squirrel problem because the figs keep disappearing.
Yeah. One, I think, is trying to, again, prune them to keep them down in size. So as tall as that tree was that I just showed you, I'm only 6'1". I pruned that whole thing down to right here. So that to me is the biggest, is keeping it down in size. I think that really tends to keep the birds out. Once it starts getting, turning into more of a shade tree, a yard tree, you're going to have those bird problems. Once you get squirrels, man, I mean, I don't know. We have a dog that's almost always out in the yard. She keeps the rats, groundhogs, stuff like that under pretty good control. You can try the bird netting. A lot of, gardeners with their blueberries will put the bird netting on. How effective it is, I know it works, but, then you've always got the extra step, beginning of the year, end of the year, putting the stuff on. Harvesting would probably be pretty challenging because, they're not like, say, a peach crop or something like that, where it's, the harvest is all at once and you're getting most of that harvest off. With a fig, you're going to have to try to get in that netting every few days to go in and pick the figs that are ripening. You can try some of the distractor type things. I mean, I've seen pie tins and Christmas ornaments and things like that for birds. We've got a lot of stuff here. I've got a lot of apples still on the tree. The birds are going to get some. And I think that's why, if you have space, if you have the ability, just plant more stuff. You're going to have some losses, but you're still going to have some things that the birds don't mess up. So that's probably not the best answer for everybody. But it's better than, getting out BB guns and picking off neighbors or something like that too. So.
All right, and Mary Keith asked about how big does a pomegranate tree get on average?
It'll get quite large, if left sort of unpruned and unmanaged. So you can train them in a couple ways. You can train them in a tree form. You can train them in a kind of a multi-stem, like you would say a clump of crepe myrtles. But it'll get 15 feet tall, 10 years later. So probably even faster than that. My one that died back to the ground and is on second year growth is already well over 6.5, 8 feet tall. So they grow pretty quick. They do have thorns too. Something else to remember if you're thinking about adding them. They do have kind of prickly thorns.
All right. And Adrian asked, with the chill hours, well, I guess her question is, how can you protect your fruit trees from frost? But if that's not, that's how I'm reading it. But Adrian, if you want to clarify that or unmute yourself, you can do that. But I think she's asking, how do you protect them from frost?
Yeah. So I'll get that question, and Brandon, you probably have too. The last couple of springs, we have that kind of later frost or risk of a frost. Gardeners will go to great lengths, covering plants with Agribond or what is it, row cover type material. Yeah, Christmas lights. I'm never going to do anything like that because, one, I just don't have time. And, for me, it's like, if you're going to live, you're going to live. And if you're going to make fruit this year, then you're going to make fruit. In the vineyards or in production agriculture, they'll light hay bales on fire throughout an orchard or throughout a vineyard to, put some heavier, warmer smoke air that kind of stays at the ground level to help that frost from coming down. So that's more frost protection. It is somewhat connected to chill hours, but chill hours is, you want to make sure you have a variety that's right about online with your normal chill hours for your area. And that's kind of the best, that killing frost. And some years it just happens. We got really close here. You go 30 miles up north, and May 11th, they had a frost. So that's exceptional, I think, for Georgia anywhere. But some years it can just happen. I think in, the nurseries, I think in the peach orchards, they'll put the irrigation sprinkler systems on and coat the plants in a thin layer of ice, thinking that, it's just at freezing, because the temperature that we're really worried about with fruit and losing blossoms or losing fruit is actually below freezing. It's at 28 degrees and below. So you can hit 32 and still be okay. Honestly, my blueberries for 3 years, I keep thinking, like, those things bloom in March. We always get a frost, and they tend to grow right through it. So I think it's more of those first couple of years, especially on like your pomegranate and some of your muscadines. Those first couple of years, I grew Supreme, and it's about 2 years behind all my other varieties because, again, it's just more tender those first couple years. So that vine got killed back to the ground. So it was once it finally got up and got lignified enough, then it was a little more cold tolerant. I think it's the same with these pomegranates, because that bush, now that it's up out of the ground and got a little bit of size to the stems, last winter it didn't die back to the ground. So two different things, but somewhat connected in that chill hours do connect with that early bloom oftentimes, but some years we just have a late frost no matter what. If we get a frost in April, towards the middle or end of April, everything's out. It doesn't matter what your chill hours were, everything's going to be out by then. So then we're talking about frost protection, and I just don't go to drastic measures.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question we have is from David. He wants to know if you can kind of change the fruiting season of figs in a hydroponics situation For example, using a water chiller at different times each year on different plants?
That's a good question, David. I wish I knew. I have no experience with hydroponics. I would think it's more of the air temperature than anything to get those things to go into dormancy. But I don't know. There might be some literature on it, but I don't have enough knowledge of hydroponic figs or, even protected environment growing of figs to answer that question with any sort of accuracy.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one either, but yeah, like Josh said, I would think it's more so, the actual air temperature, because like, when winter comes, that tells the plant that cooler weather is coming, go dormant basically. So, but
and
we do have
it
a
may be light
hydroponics
exposure too. So David, you might look at any articles on both temperature and then also hours of light exposure, because that also starts slowing plants down, is that decreasing day length. So you might be able to trick them by changing the light exposure if you're growing inside.
Yep. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, we definitely thank you, Josh, for teaching this class tonight. And if y'all have any more questions after this, you can, I put my email in the chat along with the plant sale discount code as well. All right. So everyone have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Brandon.
All right. Appreciate it, Josh.
Yep.